Greetings and salutations. This is Life and Books and Everything. Welcome back. I'm Kevin DeYoung, and I am joined today with Justin Taylor and Collin Hansen, my good friends. Good to have you men back in the studio, warming up the electric guitar, the djembe. We're a very simple band here. And I want to thank Crossway again. Gospel People, A Call for Evangelical Integrity by Michael Reeves. Came out last month. I want to mention again this book. I don't know if we mentioned it before, but in a time where there's lots of conversation about evangelical, and the term can be poorly defined, and some people are ready to throw it overboard, Michael Reeves argues for a global scriptural historical perspective and urges Christians to return to the root of that term, which is, of course, the evangel, the gospel. And I think most of our listeners would be familiar with Michael Reeves. And if you're not, you just can count on thoughtfulness, a real earnest, warm piety in what he writes. And so check out this book, and grateful for Crossway sponsoring the program. And if you go to crossway.org/plus, you can get 30% off with your Crossway Plus account. So that's a good deal. All right. Good to see you, brothers, again. When I was at T4G, and you guys were at T4G as well, I had a number of people come up and thank me for Life and Books and Everything. So that was gratifying, although several people, in the midst of their general support and commendation, made a point to say, I fast forward all of the sports banter. I'm just not interested. I just didn't know we were missing the mark so egregiously. So we won't say anything about, the spring game for whatever college football team or the start of the WNBA season, but perhaps just a little bit of life or family banter. Justin, what's going on in the JT household as we come to the end of the school year, roll into spring? Any good updates for us?
Yeah, let me just mention first the penalty that the NCAA issued on Scott Frost with the show cause. And
go into great detail.
Yeah, so first point is we'll pass. And welcome back, listeners.
Yeah.
I think the most interesting thing for our family right now is that we have a daughter, our oldest daughter, graduating from high school. So I think she has 2 weeks left of school. So that's a milestone when you get to that point of your formal schooling being done. And our youngest will be entering kindergarten next year. So we don't quite have the DeYoung spread, but pretty close. So that's major life events. Looking forward to summer. Looking forward to a little bit of travel and vacation and being together as a family, especially thinking about the family unit. Kind of, this is the last hurrah, all being together with 5 kids. So got a couple surgeries planned for our kids, so that's never fun. Yeah. But so this will be a momentous year in the Taylor clan.
Good. Yeah. We also have a graduating senior, our oldest son, and he's, I think, done pretty much now. He did his AP tests and other exams, and now they have like 2 extra weeks of doing nothing or something. If you're from the school, I didn't say that. I'm sure they're working very hard.
You need to talk to the head of that school, I think.
I know who's in charge of this school, and he's, we won't do an episode on this, but the process of applying to colleges and making college decisions seems a lot different. And I guess it should be 25 years since we did it. But
because they have computers now, Kevin?
Well, it just seems so much more complicated. I don't know how you guys did it. I got all the mailers from people, and, you look at them, and I kept a box of them, and I wasn't going to go to 98% of them. And I picked 5 schools I wanted to visit. We visited them, and I applied to a few of them and got in, and then narrowed it down to 2, and then just told my parents, this is where I'm going. And I think, there's COVID, which has made visiting schools harder. It's also made a backlog that we found some of the schools were saying they had twice as many applicants as they've ever had before. But it's the haves and the haves not. I think some schools we're going to find smaller aren't going to make it. And then the ones that are maybe like in the South, some of these state schools are just applications are through the roof. And with Common App, you just, put your thing on the computer, hit it, pay $40, send it off to the other schools. I mean, I think my son applied to like 13 schools or something. So we've been in the thick of that, and that's been stressful, but I think he knows where he's going. He's decided to go to NC State. So there you go. It's close by, relatively a few hours, and he's got a lot of friends there. He wants to study. You guys will probably wants to study agriculture. He didn't grow up on a farm.
That is amazing.
I know.
I love this.
Yeah, so he's got the farmer is from being born in Iowa, I think.
And what does he want to do?
He wants to do the concentration on turf grass management.
Wow.
That is so cool.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe he can work on a ball field or a golf course or something.
Do you know that Nebraska got a new turf this year?
Yeah, tell us about that.
It's green.
This is a totally unpaid, unprompted, unsolicited commercial, but we went and looked at a bunch of Christian liberal arts schools and the ones that I wanted him to go look at, and he didn't end up picking those. But we went to Hillsdale, we went to Grove City, we went to Covenant, and I didn't take him to visit Geneva College, but I was just there speaking and met with the president there. Anyways, for Christian parents out there, it's I'm not an expert, but I really liked all those schools. I would have felt good about sending my son to any of those Christian liberal arts schools, and they're all quite different, but what they're doing and where they're at. So take that as a free bit of commercial time from Kevin. Collin, what's going on in the Hansen household? Any more babies?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
We've our little William at 10 months is the most pleasant young child we could ever.
I thought he was William the Conqueror.
Yeah, well, conquering through charm. So a conqueror for the 21st as opposed to the 11th century. But for the new millennium. So that's
it, but it's just the fact that one political party has made it a plank in their platform, and increasingly the other political party, as Justin's pointed out online, has moved away from safe, legal, and rare, the Clinton line, to celebrating. I mean, to share your abortion story. This is such a good. Well, that issue in itself doesn't account for everything, and it's a counterfactual to try to imagine, well, what if that wasn't the case? But it is the case. And as much as political polarization is a real danger, and it is, I think we have to remember that one of the reasons we have it is because we can be thankful that not everyone has capitulated on abortion, when in many places they might. And then the third point, and I'll see what you want to say, Collin. I don't know if you guys share my frustration in this. I think you do. But anytime this comes up, abortion, and it gets thrown back. Well, you evangelicals, you're pro-life until they're born, and then you don't do anything. And what we really need to do is, if you're really consistently pro-life, it's womb to tomb. And in fact, people wouldn't be having abortions if you did more to change the circumstances and structures that lead to abortion. That argument gets very stale to me. Not that there's nothing to learn from it, but on two fronts. One, it's just simply not true that after birth, Christians don't do it. Christians, by any measure, give the most, they provide the most, they adopt the most. So it's just not true to say that Christians aren't the ones caring. And then on the other end, that argument equates certain political programs or givens on the left as the only way that you genuinely care for people. And that's a debate that Christians can have. But the assumption is just so often, you're not for this particular program, therefore you're not really doing anything to address the problem. So I find it at this moment where there's something perhaps very, very good to happen. It's almost like, Christians can't ever take, good news. Need to somehow turn it back on. This is something there's still something really bad that we need to self-flagellate for. And it's frustrating, and I don't think it's accurate or it's helpful. Collin, what do you say? You can hit on any of my 3 points or give your own bullet points.
Well, one thing, shout out to my pastor, Isaac Adams, on this last Sunday. I just prayed unequivocally with thanks for at least what we see in the draft decision, as well as praying for the unborn. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times it's kind of like what you said there, Kevin, about polarization. It's about politics in general, that there's a thought that we need less politics in the church. And I just don't think that's the case, meaning there are any number of ethical issues that are significantly important that God's word directly deals with, that we have to work out in society as individuals, together as a society, and even as a church together. And so I think we need more discipleship on political issues in our churches. Now, we need less of it that is framed in a dominantly partisan direction. A lot of it that is sort of handed down from a specific party on both sides there. But you're exactly right, Kevin, that part of the confusion here comes, it's almost like it's almost like there was a sexual revolution, but then the people who responded to the sexual revolution were somehow the people who started the culture war. And it's like, I mean, right. I don't see how that's possible. I mean, the position of arguing for the life of the child is not the new position. The right to be able to abort the child is the new position. So how is it that you have a problem of fighting? Why is it your fault for fighting back against something that's changed? And I know you can't boil all of politics the last 60 years down to that issue, but it's a significant factor and I wrote about this in my piece for the Gospel Coalition, If Roe is Dead, there were no pro-life parties in 1973.
Right.
The Democrats were slightly more pro-life than Republicans, which will be interesting now that people go back and look at the books of which states had bans and which states didn't. It'll be surprising for a lot of them to realize that a lot of more Catholic states had bans, but that was at a time when Catholics were more aligned with each other on this topic, which they are not now any longer at an aggregate level. But there were no pro-life parties in 1973. There was no obvious pro-life candidates for president. Now you had people who were kind of trying to work this out, but the fact that we've shifted from two pro-choice parties with pro-life minorities somewhere of varying sizes within them to at least one party that doesn't favor abortion on demand for any reason the entire time, I'll take that. I'm grateful for that. Now, I'll stop short of saying necessarily, I mean, I do think Republicans are pro-life. Now, we'll see how much truth there is to them wanting to do this instead of being able to hide behind Roe all the time. So I'll still wait and see exactly how that works out. But it's positive. I think it's positive at the legislature level. And I'm also really grateful, if this is true, that we finally got Republican justices who followed through after how many generations who failed us on that front. And we can thank President Trump and Senator, Mitch McConnell and others for that, for doing that, and the justices themselves, of course. But I mean, this is not an issue that I think church leaders can or should avoid. This is the most obvious candidate for an issue that we will look back, Lord willing, in future generations and believe was completely abhorrent, impossible, barbaric. And I'm not in any ways trying to minimize the real issues that lead women to make this terrible decision. I'm just saying it's a terrible decision. And I don't think it's responsible for pastors to avoid talking about that. So I just want to give an appreciation to Isaac for praying about that. But then also, we're the kind of church where our pastor is going to pray about a lot of different things, and not only abortion, and not only kind of quote unquote conservative partisan issues. So I'm grateful for that, and I hope a lot of churches did that this last Sunday. I think
we included it. I mean, I included it in our prayer and prayed that the draft opinion would be the final opinion, and that Roe would be overturned, and prayed that we would continue to care for women in vulnerable positions and forgiveness for those who have had abortions and led others to have abortions, all of that. So, and I bet that's not abnormal. That was probably the norm across evangelical churches across this country. And I know it can be loath to think of a single issue voter and to as soon as you elevate one issue, it's like you're saying none of the other issues matter, and none of us would say that. But there really is no other. I mean, it comes down: is that a life? Is that a human person in the womb? The same genetic code that we all have. There's organically, biologically, what you're hearing and seeing, we are the same people. We're bigger than we were, the same people we were, at conception. And if that is a human person, then the human person is deserving of rights and deserving of life. And if we are killing those persons, there's as bad as other policies can be, whatever you think of them. Are they legally giving the right to kill people and then sell innocent people? Not by that shouldn't have happened. As bad as that. No, legally, and then many people celebrating the fact that they did and they could, and what a gift it is to humankind. I mean, when you really think about it, it is about as bad as something gets, and so we should not apologize for being passionate about this issue and rejoicing if Roe is overturned, and praying that the life of the unborn are protected in every way possible.
Now, Scott Klusendorf uses a little technique in his training on pro-life issues he calls it trot out the toddler, and as a defeater to say, like, what if it was toddlers that were being killed? I mean, can you imagine somebody saying, yeah, killing toddlers it's an important issue, but it's not the only issue. That's not the only thing you should think about when voting. I think that even those of us who are pro-life don't always fully face the horror of what we're talking about. We are talking about killing a person, a human being, an innocent, defenseless child. It just so happens that being in the womb somehow magically makes it different than killing a newborn, but functionally there's no difference between the two. And so I think if there was a movement in our country to kill everybody under the age of 2, I mean, I think that would, like, how is this even a debate? But that's the reality. We believe that this is killing an innocent life.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Collin? Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
Just one more thought on the consistency issue, because that's going to be thrown back in our face all of the time. And I think it's just worth thinking through how to respond to that. Is that true? Are we inconsistent? And I think one question to ask is, if I was 100% consistent on your definition, would you change your mind? Would you think differently about abortion? Would you think differently about me? And I think a lot of times it's a smokescreen that somebody throws up. But I was also helped years ago by Scott Klusendorf saying, okay, maybe I'm inconsistent. Doesn't mean I'm wrong about the life of the unborn, or that should be illegal. So maybe I'm inconsistent, but I still can be right and inconsistent on one of those two. And then, as you were pointing out, Kevin, functionally, by and large, pro-life Christians are not inconsistent, whether you're talking about crisis pregnancy or supporting mothers. We might not support governmental intervention to the same degree, but Christians and pro-life Christians and conservative Christians are on the ground helping in starting adoption agencies and adopt more frequently and support mothers. And yet there's more that we can do. We shouldn't bristle against that. We should be moving towards women in need and children who need placement and adoptions.
Yeah, philosophically, it's this distinction has been lost on everyone, but it was very important in the history development of natural law and political theory. The difference between positive rights and negative rights. They get called different things, but there's a difference between somebody saying, education is a human right or healthcare is a human right. That means somebody has to do something for you. And people can make that case, but a negative right is you cannot do something to me. So it's much different to say we are advocating that this person has a right to live. You should not kill this person. Okay, well then, are you providing them meals? Are you providing them healthcare? That's a different kind of right. And at least the tradition leading to the founding of our country distinguish between those kind of rights, which goes back to Pufendorf and all of these natural law theorists. And so often because rights is a very, Americans, don't want to be against rights generally. That gets thrown out there, but they're very different kinds of rights. And I think to your point, Justin, of course, we want to think about how we can care for one another better. But really, if you were to be an at-risk mom, a single mother, where could you most immediately find a group of people who would want to help you? I think it would be in a church. Of course, the church is going to make mistakes, and the church is going to all those important things. But really, I mean, just look right now, Afghan refugee resettlements. I don't have hard numbers, but I just have to imagine where that's happening is overwhelmingly in churches, or maybe more broadly in religious groups and religious communities, like our church is sponsoring, an Afghan family and providing house and housing and all of these things for people. Churches do this kind of stuff all the time and care for people all the time. And so I don't think the instinct to want to be humble and acknowledge our failures is good, but not when the failures are exaggerated, or they're the sort of failures that are endemic to just to human finitude and limitations, rather than what's actually happening compared. So if the standard is, what are you doing compared to everything you could be doing, or what are you doing compared to what other sorts of people are doing? Those are two very different comparisons. Anything to add before we move on from this, Collin?
Quick thought on this one. I don't know if you guys read that really amazing Ringer essay from Jonathan Charks, Does My Son Know You, about the church, and was thinking about that lately with all this time I'm spending with all these other baseball families, and you get to know people and really love and appreciate people, become fast friends just by spending time with them, which I think is the point. But then Jonathan points out that that's all well and good until you're dying of cancer and you need somebody to help watch your wife and your child grow up for the next 15 years. Then who are you gonna call? It's not going to be your baseball friends. It's going to need to be a church. And I think that can be something that's missed, even in people who are missing, even Christians who are missing church to be able to do these other things. And so when you talk about Afghan refugees, or you talk about a woman in need, one of the reasons why you think of a church is not only because hopefully we're living out Christ's commands, but also because it's one of the only social institutions that's left that actually provides and brings people together in these ways. You can find government agencies do a lot of different things, a lot of different social clubs. When it comes down to people who are going to be good to help each other just for the sake of doing that, you're going to depend on churches, just the way we've always depended on churches to do that kind of thing, and why government's never going to be a replacement for that. And so if the effect of all of this is that there's more debate about abortion, there are more churches that are stepping up in different environments to handle different circumstances because it's a more pressing issue upon them as a result of this, then bring it on. Let's be that example following Christ. I've got my discouragements about the church in a lot of different ways, but to your point, Kevin, I think this is something we can do. And I don't find many people who would disagree across the spectrum on what to do. And maybe that is different from previous generations. I'm not sure. But I can only speak for this generation. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to find many churches that wouldn't be willing to help, however they can.
Good word. Let's finish by doing books, the life and books and everything. We love books. I want to mention here, we have a second sponsor for today, the Westminster Bookstore. All of us have benefited from going to their website, and they work really hard to have the best deals out there and to really think about the books that they're putting out there. So this is a not-for-profit ministry of Westminster Theological Seminary, dedicated to serving the church with biblically faithful, theologically robust, pastorally relevant books, from kids all the way up through pastors. So if you want commentaries, if you're a new believer, a young parent, WTSbooks.com. WTSbooks.com. As a special offer for LBE listeners, you can get 50% off the newly released Biggest Story Bible Storybook, book of stories about the Bible story book. So visit
unofficial title.
Yeah, who titled that thing? Nobody.
I blame the publisher and
nobody
the author.
on here is responsible for that. WTSbooks.com/biggest story, and the discount will automatically apply at checkout. So thankful for them. I know Crossway's worked with them on a lot of books, and they really do a great job at putting good stuff out there at the best prices that they possibly can. So books, what books are you men reading right now? I started last year. This has been helpful. I am keeping this little journal, and I write down when I finish a book. Otherwise, I forget.
Is it called
I can come
Goodreads.com?
No, I use little, nice, cool,
okay,
leather little books. I am an old soul when it comes to that. I don't my books.
When it comes to that, or when it comes to everything,
except I'm doing a podcast, I guess. But
that's true. Talking
yes,
about books.
I don't read. I don't read books. I tried the Kindle thing. I just could not do it. I read hard books. I underline them. I write it down on a piece of paper here. So, what books have you guys been reading? Give us however many you can do in 3 minutes.
All right, I can go.
Justin.
Matthew Continetti, The Right, The 100-Year War for American Conservatism.
That is a page turner.
Yeah, for you.
It is.
I know, it is. It's very well written. It's a narratival history. It pulls together a lot of things, kind of goes back to, rather than saying, let's go back to Buckley, let's go back to the 1920s. And it's well written. It's not technical, but it's interesting. Even if you wouldn't call yourself a political conservative, I think it's interesting to try to map the last 100 years of going from Calvin Coolidge to Donald J. Trump. So fascinating history, and I'm maybe a quarter of the way through it. But are you guys both reading it?
Yeah, I'm about half of the way through it, and there's so many. It explains. Whenever you read books like that, you just realize all of these things always have lots of infighting, and there's so many strands, and they're broader than you think, and you see individual people's gifts come out. The more than half of the book is really, Buckley, who had many really strong qualities and had to repudiate earlier views and got some things really wrong, especially on race early on. But his charm, his charisma, his wealth, all of that, which held together this very diverse movement in these strands. So yeah, I'm about halfway through, and it's really well written. It makes me want to say, when is Collin or someone's going to do the last 100-year history of, I don't know, Reformed evangelicalism and all of its glories and messes. But I'm taking away from your time. But Collin, did you answer Justin's question? Are you reading it?
Not yet. I'm waiting for you. I've got it. I know exactly where it is in my office, but I'm waiting for you guys to get through it. Well, I don't think I heard good things about it, wow. The publisher kindly sent me a copy of it.
Oh, wow. You are really in the know. I didn't.
Ben Sass wrote a review in National Review that was good. I think
that's what I read. And that's what I asked the publisher for a copy. Okay, nice. Thanks for reminding me.
So you asked the publisher.
Okay. Let's not, too high and mighty. You had to ask the publisher.
They kindly sent me one upon request. I don't see what the problem is here.
No, good for you. I bought it on Amazon. I'm feeling out $30 now.
All right. So the second one, sticking with kind of conservative history, Watergate: A New History by Garrett Graff. Garrett is kind of a younger guy. At least he looks like our age or younger. So I still consider that
really young.
Yeah, really
younger guy.
Super young.
He did the oral history called The Plane of the Sky on 9/11, which you haven't gotten a hold of that's really worth. I would recommend listening to it on Audible because they have a lot of different actors.
Which I did at your recommendation.
Yeah. Was it a good recommendation?
Oh, absolutely. Echoed for everybody out there.
So you kind of think, 50 years later, why do we need anything new on Watergate? But he's uncovered, I think, some new things and put things together in a really interesting way. So I'm listening to that as well. The Tender Bar, a memoir by J.R. Moehringer. I'm not sure if I'm saying that exactly correctly, but Pulitzer Prize winning author writing a memoir growing up in New York. And he's very gifted. He ended up, I think Andre Agassi read The Tender Bar when he was finishing up his tennis career and said, what would it be like to have my own story told through the eyes of a Pulitzer Prize winning author? So that's good. And then last, on a more spiritual level, I'm preaching this coming Sunday, which is relatively a rare event for me, but I'm going to preach on the Lord's Prayer. And so I am reading Kevin DeYoung's book on the Lord's Prayer, and Wesley Hill's got a little book on the Lord's Prayer. So those are really appreciating both of those and kind of priming the pump before preaching the word. Thanks for writing that, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to, I can't remember which books I've mentioned before, but if I can't remember, you probably can't remember. Just mention some common themes here. Donald J. Devine, The Enduring Tension, Capitalism and the Moral Order. So that was good. A meandering, I would say, defense of capitalism. David McCullough, I mentioned before, just finished the Wright brothers book, but his book, The American Spirit, Who We Are and What We Stand For, is a collection of mostly commencement addresses and other occasions. Maybe I mentioned that. I just always enjoy reading him. So I have, this was an interesting one, Harry Emerson Fosdick, Selected Sermons.
Oh, boy.
So, yeah, and I read, I power skimmed, I should say, his autobiography and read some of his biography. So I just finished writing an article for RTS's online journal. RTS is going to do a journal dedicated to Fosdick. This was my suggestion, so you can blame me, because the 100-year anniversary of his sermon is coming up in 2 weeks, the Shall the Fundamentalists Win? So I thought, I asked Blair Smith and John Meether, that'd be interesting to reflect on liberalism. Where was it? Where is it? On Fosdick. So I wrote a, 2,000-word article on Fosdick and on that sermon.
Is it titled The Fosdick Flop?
That is, I should do that. Another track and field reference. Appreciate that. Okay. I read a bunch of covenant theology books for my class. I won't mention that. Oh, Stephen B. Clark, Man and Woman in Christ. So this is a book from 1980. And a lot of you, I bet hardly anyone has read it, but you've read people who were very influenced by it. So Grudem, a lot of the CBMW folks were very influenced, I think, by Stephen Clark's book. It's been republished last year. It's like 750 pages. So he's now in his 80s. He's Catholic. Can't really tell, other than he's a Christian commitment in the book. But it's what's unique. It's like half going through the text, typical complementarian take on text, but very readable. And then the second half is through social science and does some history. So that was a big book. And I was surprised. I thought, I've heard of this and I haven't read it before. It was very good. Matthew
I'm surprised
Hennis,
it's that big. I've always heard about it, but I just assumed it's, a little paperback book back then.
No, it was a real big book. Matthew Hennessy, Visible Hand, A Wealth of Notions on the Miracle of the Market. So he's a Wall Street Journal, works with the editorial page, and another book on capitalism. And then finally, Dale Alquist, The Story of the Family, G.K. Chesterton and the Only State That Creates and Loves Its Own Citizens, which is a line from Chesterton. So Alquist is really one of the world's experts on Chesterton. And this is a book pulling together Chesterton. Sometimes it's little quotes. He's so quotable. And then other times it's parts of essays. So it's not just a compendium of little sentences. It's sections from essays and books on the family, and divided into, family and education, family and birth control, family and economics. And it was really fascinating. Don't agree with everything Chesterton says, but he's so fun to read and very insightful and very prescient in many of the things that he's writing about. So some of my hobby reading right now has been on the family, and that book, edited by Alquist, but basically Chesterton on the family, just came out. It was really good. Collin, take us home. What have you been reading? Obscure Russian books of poetry, no doubt.
Saving that for the fall.
Okay.
So,
hey, my Trisha, my wife, read, and I didn't, but she read Gentleman in Moscow.
And
loved it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Have you read? I got her for her birthday his book on the Lincoln Highway. Did you read it?
Did read it. Didn't love it as much, but it's on my list of one I just read. It's an interesting book with what? Did you not like it?
Slow book. Slow.
Oh, slow. Well, it is. Well,
it's like,
doesn't it have Nebraska in it?
It's like traveling through Nebraska.
Yeah.
We'll get there eventually.
No, traveling through Nebraska, you can go 85. That's fast.
It's one of those classic books that has all these different threads that only kind of come together in the end.
It's told from multiple perspectives over a 10-day period.
Yeah. I did the audiobook version of it. But so I'm when I used to work at Christianity Today, we'd get all these letters for Philip Yancey. I was not a Philip Yancey reader. But I read his memoir, Where the Light Fell, and wow, that was eye-opening. That was a page turner. I was really wanting to know about somebody about that age, that period of life, of what it was like to grow up as one of those kind of boomer Christians, fundamentalist in the Deep South. And wow, that was horrifying, sad, strange.
So what happened to him was horrifying?
Yeah, well, and his brother, his dad, died of polio when he was.
Did you say in some way he's never gotten over it? And
I think that's very clear. The memoir explains. Yeah. If you're a Philip Yancey fan, go ahead.
His dad not only died of polio, but refused to take the vaccine because he was kind of into faith healing.
Well,
so his dad was like in his 20s, right?
Yeah, early 20s. I can't remember about the vaccine part of it, but part of the story was that he was in an iron lung and essentially had no quality of life, and they decided to go off the iron lung so that he could, he was planning to be a missionary, all that sort of stuff. His mother then, so he goes off the iron lung, and they pray and they kind of celebrate, and then he dies. It is just sad. But what's so interesting is that for us who are in the Gen X to elder millennial category, we didn't grow up understanding. We did not grow up with that sort of. Polio was not a part of our lives as one clear example of that. And none of us had that kind of exposure to fundamentalism. Our exposure is to the main line. And so it just, and not the South, but the Midwest. So fascinating as a memoir, just taking me into a really different world, educationally and otherwise. And it is a page turner as well. Now, it was a recommendation from my friend Victor, who'd been reading through it. My summer reading I've set up. So I decided we should do an episode at some point of book that everybody assumes that you've read, but you haven't. That would be an interesting topic. So two of them.
That'll have to be a few episodes for Justin.
That's right. So for me, two books that I need to read, especially for my apologetics lecturing and stuff like that. I've never read The Resurrection of the Son of God by N.T. Wright or Jesus and the Eyewitnesses, The Gospel as Eyewitness Testimony by Richard Bauckham. So feels like I reference them all the time, or I read people who reference them all the time. So I'm actually reading them now. Also got in there for summer reading Jonathan Linebaugh's The Word of the Cross, reading Paul, in part because Linebaugh's leaving Cambridge to come teach at Beeson, where I serve, starting in the fall. And there he's got, Justin's got it right there. All right. So we're excited for him to join. And then I assume you guys have either seen this or read it. I think maybe, Kevin, you referenced it, but the new Zwingli book by Bruce Gordon, Zwingli, God's Armed Prophet. I'm just going to be a sucker for Reformation era biographies, and especially Bruce Gordon. I love his Calvin books. And I don't know much about Zwingli or really about the Swiss Reformation at all pre-Calvin. So that's, it's not really a page turner at this point, but I'm guessing it's gonna pick up. I hope.
No,
Kevin?
It's an academic book. Just cross-reference a podcast. Al Mohler, Thinking in Public, did a nice conversation with Bruce Gordon on Zwingli, and of course, I've heard of Zwingli forever, and but really. At least from our perspective, you tend to learn a few paragraphs about Zwingli and then Calvin and Luther. And boy, he had an interesting life.
Well,
and
that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
You see him through the eyes of Luther as his
Yeah.
opponent, as a contemporary. He depends on Luther, and then as his opponent with Marburg.
Yeah.
And then Calvin is sort of just kind of takes over and dominates the Swiss Reformation. But yeah, I mean, those first generation reformers, just remarkable. And the last one, this is the obligatory Collin book in here. It is John Madison's A Worse Place Than Hell: How the Civil War Battle of Fredericksburg Changed a Nation. That is a page turner. This is a good
Are you
historical.
reading that to your kid?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I have at least one child who wouldn't mind it, but just finished. It's a bunch of mini biographies of people who kind of leading up to their lives were changed by the Battle of Fredericksburg. And so it just got done with an abolitionist chaplain from a famous Boston family and all kind of his experience of processing this as a Christian crusade, essentially. And then next going into one of the author's specialties, which is Louisa May Alcott. And so I mean, I love the period, obviously, but it's a good thing when you're in your wheelhouse and you're reading something new, or that's written so compellingly that you're just really having a fun time with it. So really enjoying A Worse Place. And Madison is a former Pulitzer Prize historian, I think, on Louisa May Alcott, if I remember correctly. So that's my summer reading list coming up.
All right, gentlemen, wonderful to be with you. Collin, I'll have to see you. I don't know when. I mean, I'll talk to you, but if we don't have a podcast, I'll be in Birmingham.
Coming to Birmingham.
For
Presbyterians come near and far.
Yeah, we're gonna take over that Baptist enclave for a few days in June. So hope to see you there in your fair city. Maybe catch a Barons game. Actually, we won't. There's no time for anything.
Well, or just go across the street and watch the USFL. Birmingham, the exclusive home of the USFL this season.
I saw a game on last night, and there seemed to be fans numbering in the dozens.
You need to watch the Saturday night games, which is when the Birmingham Stallions play, and that's when people turn out. But considering every single game in the entire league is in Birmingham, we can't go to all of them, Kevin.
Well, let me just bookend this fabulous podcast by ending now with sports banter. So this summer, here's what I'm so excited about. I bought these tickets the first hour they came out, and I'm taking my two oldest sons to Eugene, Oregon, Hayward Field, and seeing the track and field world championships.
Nice.
Okay, can I get it?
Yes.
I hear the oohs and ahs.
I love it.
This is the first time that the track and field world championships have ever been in the United States. They were supposed to be last year. Everything got pushed back for COVID. They're at University of Oregon and the mecca of sports running. Oregon's one of 3 or 4 states I've never been to. Sorry, Oregonians, or however you say it. I know not to say Oregon. I did have a friend in seminary who he would get on me if I said Oregon, and he said, it's not Oregon. So I said, okay, well, I'm not from there. And he said, well, you should know. And I said, well, how do you pronounce that bridge in Michigan that connects the upper and lower? He said, the Mackinac? I said, yeah, exactly.
Well, you got him, Kevin.
I sure did. I've lived to tell the tale. So I'm excited for that. I am a sucker. I could watch track meets all day. They're so exciting. People running in circles.
This is the guy who said baseball was boring earlier.
Yeah, well, there's not enough running.
Well, it lasts longer. That's the
yeah. Okay, so that's maybe we'll have a summer catch-up podcast at some point. So good to be with you, men. Blessings, and thank you to everyone for sticking with us all the way through the end. Until next time, glorify God, enjoy Him forever, and read a good book.